This is the fourth video conversation with Mike, and this one is going to be slightly different. During the previous videos, we seem to have reached a position whereby we were clear about where our views differed, even if we could not seem to agree. Specifically, we disagreed about the definitions of supernatural and natural and the related likelihoods of claims about those spaces. If you haven't seen the previous videos, I recommend at least going back and looking at our third conversation, as I think this will get you up to speed. So far in our conversations, it feels like Mike has been resistant to talking about why he believes in God, and specifically the God of the Christian Bible. I don't think this is evasiveness on Mike's part. I believe that Mike is trying to find a way for theists and atheists to communicate, and he recognizes that arguments from personal experience are only compelling to the person who has had those experiences. Therefore, Mike wants to explore a philosophical position rather than make a claim to knowledge. I think he wants to find some philosophical space where we can respectfully agree that it's rational to hold either position. I am not sure that we can or will find this space. Despite this, we have both acknowledged that neither of us are certain about our positions, and at no point has the conversation been anything other than respectful. Street Epistemology seeks to understand how a person has come to knowledge, not explore a philosophical position. Mike believes in the God of the Christian Bible, and I very much wanted to understand why Mike holds this belief. Mike is an intelligent and educated guy. The more we have spoken, the more I have enjoyed our conversations. It has become increasingly apparent that Mike is very aware of the weakness of many of the typical Christian apologetic arguments. Furthermore, he and I are very much aligned on much of our philosophy. This has only made me more curious about how we have arrived at such different outcomes. Towards the end of our last conversation, and in his response videos, Mike introduced the idea of personal revelation. This, I felt, was a claim that could be explored in a more standard street epistemology context. How can Mike know he has had this revelation? And what methods has he used to conclude that the existence of the supernatural is the only or best explanation for this experience? Rather than attempt to reset our conversation and risk falling back into repetition, I thought it might be helpful for my friend Joe to speak to Mike and conduct a street epistemology interview on the subject of personal revelation. Early in the conversation, you hear Joe and Mike try and identify a knowledge claim. Mike had once again wanted to initially explore a philosophical position, which I feared would have seen us return to the territory covered in the previous videos. However, I think that Joe and Mike were able to get things back on track, and we learned a little more about what Mike believes and his reasons why. Thanks to both Joe and Mike for agreeing to do this video. Mike has suggested that we turn the tables, and he interviews us in our next conversation, which I am more than happy to do. Keep an eye out for that video in the future.
Well, it is nice to meet you. I definitely enjoyed watching your conversations with Will. I guess, yeah, my name's Joe. I've been involved with the Street Epistemology community for a little while now, and I've been doing some live streams with Will, which is, I think, what made him think of recommending me to chat to you. And I think basically where we're at now is that he thought that it might be useful to have a conversation that was more grounded within the SE technique rather than the sort of open form conversations that you've been having with him so far. And yeah, I think typically with SE, we would start with a claim that you might make. So we should try to iron out a claim that you make about the world and see if we can do some SE with it.
Okay. Yeah, you'll need to kind of guide me along with that because I don't. The problem is that it's easy to make a claim that's not nuanced enough to hold water. And the more nuanced it becomes, the more complex it becomes, and it's hard to defend and where that support. You know.
So I mean, it's not necessarily about defending it with SE. It's about analyzing the tools used to arrive at the truth of the claim. So it's because the way I see street epistemology is once the claim is made and the conversation begins, the claim immediately becomes irrelevant. It's now looking at the epistemology that led towards the acceptance of the claim.
Yeah.
So the reason I found the claim you suggested problematic is that it starts with an if statement. It's not exactly a claim to knowledge. It's starting with an if, and then it's leading to a claim that is sort of an allowance for reason as opposed to something rooted in epistemology. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh no, please go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is that it's a two-part claim. So essentially, like, I don't know if you've watched my responses to our conversations and everything, but basically what I'm saying is that theists and atheists live in two different worlds when it comes to epistemology, and they're closed worlds, like they're echo chambers. Like neither one really understands what's going on outside their world, and they're both sides are convinced that the other side is irrational. So both sides treat the other side as if they're outside the realm of people they can have a conversation with because they're not being reasonable. Um, and what I'm trying to say to the theist side. So basically, my argument is more for the theists, but the problem is that it's kind of hard to talk to theists about this because they don't want to give up any ground. But what I'm saying is that theists are arguing for a high level of certainty when it comes to God, by the way they make their philosophical arguments. Like they're basically saying the prime mover argument, the fine tuning argument, and this whole sequence of other arguments give a strong level of evidence in support of the idea that God exists, and that's where they make their case. And I say, I'm trying to argue that no, we could lower that confidence level from something like 85% or 95% down to maybe 65, 70%, because we have this other line of evidence, which is personal experience or personal whatever, however you want to label it, revelation, personal divine self-revelation, to where we can enter the conversation with atheists as people that are being reasonable. In other words, we don't have to like assume from the start that they're unreasonable, which makes it for a difficult conversation.
Yeah, I certainly don't. I don't see you as unreasonable, even if you took or anyone as unreasonable. I mean, it's not a view on you, but like, for example, okay, an interesting exercise might be if I were to say, do you find the following true? And a question could be such as, do you think that you have received revelation? Or do you think that the universe has a supernatural origin? These are sort of direct claims to knowledge that that then we could examine the epistemology leading to that. I certainly don't consider you irrational or unreasonable if you were to make those claims. I would be interested in analyzing the epistemology that that helped you to arrive at the truth of those claims. Whereas if we start with an if statement, I just don't know that it necessarily could be done in a street epistemology style conversation at all.
Yeah. So basically, I don't know if there's a way to frame it without an if, but essentially, if I don't put the if in that statement, I would just have to make a longer statement that makes two claims. So I'm first I'm claiming that there's a certain, essentially, like theists and atheists have certain things in common. Like we acknowledge that there's certain pathways to knowledge. So things like reason and science, or reason and empirical investigation, whatever. And then I'm saying that theists have this additional, or at least the possibility exists, that if there is some kind of intelligence that is beyond our sphere of existence, that the possibility is for knowledge to come in the other direction. So one is we're here and we're searching things outward to try to figure out what's going on. And that's all we have if God doesn't exist. But if God does exist, there's the reverse possibility that this God can reveal something to us.
And I definitely, as I said, I did listen to your conversations with Will, and then I was interested also and watched your responses to the conversations, although there hasn't been, unless it was today or yesterday, you haven't done a third video based on...
No, because he just published the last two. He just published them this week, and I've had a really crazy week.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I probably won't get...
That's another thing I want to acknowledge. I understand you're a very busy person, and I'm grateful that you would take the time to speak to me. But even in listening to that and hearing you say that, a claim that would seem obvious to me that you would be willing to make is that there is a supernatural realm outside our own, or the universe, the origins of the universe are supernatural. I don't think it needs any kind of if probability is X or anything like that, because regardless of probabilistic, you have arrived at the belief that that claim is true, correct?
Well, Yeah, so I mean, essentially, what you're doing is you're asking me for my personal beliefs, and what I'm making, the claims I've been making are theoretical claims. Like, basically, reasonably speaking, we can make this particular claim, and we can make this particular claim, and together there are some basis for belief. But I mean, you're asking me personally how I feel about it, which to me is not really interesting because I'm just one person among.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
yeah, well then perhaps street epistemology isn't really the way to go about it because it is concerned with personal belief. It is directly concerned with personal belief. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what the whole process is regarding. So, typically the way it would go is that someone would make a belief claim, and I would ask them then about the epistemology used to arrive at their belief claim, and it wouldn't
Mhm.
necessarily be a personal belief claim, even if it's a claim that dictates the truth of the entire universe and everyone in it. It's a claim that the individual is making, and that the individual has arrived at being true through epistemology. So, and then we would
Um,
we would study the epistemology.
okay, so yeah, so let's just say, I mean, I personally believe that God exists, right? So that's a claim,
Hmm.
and can we go with that, or is it too broad?
Sure. I mean, no, that's absolutely. So, we could say that the claim is okay, that a God exists. Does that sound suitable?
I guess.
Yeah. I mean, are you
Yeah.
happy to explore that? I don't want to if it's not something you're comfortable exploring, I don't want to force you into the conversation either. But that's sort of the sort of claim that would be required to be made to then move on with a street epistemology style conversation.
Yeah, that's fine, I guess. I mean, like we'll see how it goes
Yeah.
as we move
Yeah.
along, but I mean, that's a way I guess we could turn this into a personal thing.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're uncomfortable with it at any point or anything, of course, I don't expect you to continue the conversation.
Sure,
Then,
sure.
okay, great. So, if you were to put the claim that a God exists on a confidence scale, with 0 being all doubt and no confidence, and 100 being absolute certainty, where do you think you would fit on that confidence scale?
So I'll probably put pretty much anything somewhere like in the 80s, 90%.
Okay.
Um, Anything that's a relatively high degree of confidence versus something
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
50s or 60s. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So somewhere in the upper range of
Yeah.
above the 50s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you imagine you had weighted scales and there were evidentiary scales, and you had on one side of the scale the pieces of evidence that pushed that number to the lower bounds of the 60s, of the, that sort of thing, and then you had on the other side of the evidentiary scales factors that caused that number to go up towards the 80 side. Is there any one component that would be the largest piece of evidence on the side of the scales to increase your belief in that a God exists, or what would be the largest piece of evidence?
Um, yeah, I'm not sure I can think of. Are you talking about specific events or something?
Yeah, it might be an event. It might be that you've read something that you believe in. It could be, yeah, personal experience. It could be anything that you consider evidentiary, that evidence that supports the claim that a God exists.
Yeah. So basically, what I've kind of laid out in the previous conversation is basically that um, what would be considered general evidence, like evidence that's accessible to anyone.
Hmm.
Um, I would say that that line of evidence probably can only take somebody around 50, 60%, somewhere
Okay.
close to the middle.
Yeah.
And somebody might even argue that's slightly below the 50-50 line.
Yeah.
And then there's the personal evidence, the personal experience that can bring somebody to a higher level of, so higher degree of certainty, so that they have some level of confidence that exists.
Hmm.
Um, and um, and what I meant by personal experience is basically life experience. So it's not like, okay, I had this one experience, this one event, and boom, I think that settles it. But it's just like um, uh, basically a lifetime of a sense that there's somebody out there that's somehow involved in your life.
Okay. So what I think I hear you saying, and it's important for me to note that it's not. I don't. Yeah. I'm interested in the things that convinced you. So let's forget about the external impression of those things that convinced you for a minute and focus on just yours. And what I think I hear you saying is that throughout your life you had various experiences over a lifetime, and these experiences seem to have been managed in a way that gave you the impression they were being influenced by a greater power, by God in this case.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have is it possible to think of an example in that line of culmination of something like maybe the most significant one that made you think that this was an adjustment, that this was God acting in the world?
I mean, it is. Yeah, this is kind of the part where it's a little bit tricky to get into, because I don't really, I don't know how to explain it, but essentially, like, I can list a set of experiences,
Hmm.
and I already know what you're going to say for each of those experiences, so it doesn't really mean much to me.
Okay.
What I'm looking at is in terms of the theoretical aspect of it. Like, is it logical for somebody to base their beliefs based on personal experiences? Now, a personal experience could be anything. I mean, I could give you like probably just to give a few examples. Like,
Yeah, sure.
at some early stage in my life, uh, I had like basically a change in direction where like my life wasn't going so well, and then at some point I had some kind of experience with God where things took a turn for the better, and I changed my life direction and things like that. And then over the years, I mean, it could be anything from little things to life altering decisions where, um, I mean, I don't know what example to give. Like, um, you know, answer prayers on specific situations to um, just various events in life. I mean, I'll have to sit there and make a list, I guess. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think it's important to say that I'm not here to judge, and I'm not going to judge your personal experiences. And yeah, if we did come up with some examples, I may have some questions to ask about them, but I certainly wouldn't doubt that you had those experiences. Maybe an interesting tack to go. Do you remember when you came to the conclusion that this claim was true, that a God existed in the world?
Um, so in terms of like my personal belief, I mean, I was raised a Christian, so I could say I've been indoctrinated and brainwashed with that stuff as a baby all the way to an adult. But it was probably when I was about 20 that it became something personal, where I felt like I was starting to experience this for myself. It
Right.
wasn't something somebody put in my head as a child.
Right. So what I think you're saying is that maybe as a younger age, it was taught to you as perhaps anything else was in school, and like
Yeah,
other
yeah,
topics, you haven't seen an example of that. You follow the teachings as they're being taught to you by
yeah,
trusted elders, etc. But at the age of around 20, something happened that then that might be when you adopted that belief as your own, when you
yeah,
decided
yeah.
that the claim was true. And do you do you mind me asking what happened at that? Was there any events that happened at that time, or any new teachings that you read, or anything like that?
No, it was just a series of events where I guess I was kind of like, I don't know, I had gone through like an extended period where things just weren't going well for me. I think I was kind of entering a period of depression. I was pretty discouraged with the direction of my life, and things weren't changing for an extended period of time. And then I did talk to this pastor one day, and he just explained some things to me about, you know, my own beliefs, which I didn't for some reason understand before.
Hmm.
And then things changed direction quite a bit after that for me, and my life kind of started taking a different turn. And that was just sort of like the beginning of just a sequence of other experiences, and so.
Okay. So it sounds like uh, you were having trouble in your a difficult time in your life, as I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, and then uh, you spoke to this pastor who gave you some good advice and highlighted some ideas of your beliefs. And after that moment, did you adopt the truth of the claim more so moving forward, and did you then attribute the improvements into your life subsequently as a result of adopting that claim, or?
Yeah, I think I attributed the change in my life to the fact that I kind of changed my impression of God and my understanding of who He was and what He expected from me and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so did this change of direction in your life and the conversation with the pastor, did that give you a greater interest? Did this push you in a particular direction of a certain God? Was it the God of the Bible? Was it the Christian God, or?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. And so after identifying with the Christian God, did you study further into the Christian doctrine, the Bible, and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And do you accept, to what level do you sort of accept the Bible as historical, or as truth within the Bible? Is that a text that influences your belief as well after you started to look into it more, or?
Yeah. I mean, I have a certain way of approaching the Bible, which is probably different than, like, I don't know how familiar you are with Christianity, but I would say there's probably somewhere between 7 and 10 different main traditions in Christianity that have different mental pictures of what the Bible is and how it is supposed to work and how it was meant to work. And I have kind of my own particular way of looking at it. But yeah, I mean, the Bible had an impact on my life.
Okay. Yeah. And yes, well, I was raised a Catholic, so I have a narrow understanding of a particular part of Christianity through my upbringing. But yeah, so okay, so it sounds like to me that in a traumatic time in your life, you found a caring person who was empathetic and listened to you, and also a set of ideas that gave you comfort. Do you think it's possible that 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 support given by the ideas, and that person could be separated from the truth of the God claim? Could those things have supported you in a time of need without there being a God in the world, or?
Yeah, I interpret that experience as a sort of opening of a door in a sense, more than an event in itself, as in like being itself a line of evidence, but more of a kind of opening up a direction for me. So, I mean, yeah, definitely that, taking the time to talk to that person helped,
Yeah,
but it was just kind of
a catalyst almost of.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, okay, it's interesting. And um, if we now think back to that confidence scale, and we have the scales weighted, and we're sitting around an 80% certainty that the God exists, how much of that 80% would you say that particular experience and that turning point in your life plays now as the makeup of your confidence in the belief of the God?
I mean, I think that over time, so from that age until now, like the confidence slowly increases based on
Right.
life experiences that accumulate over time.
Okay, yeah. So it's not necessarily that moment that plays a paid up, but was a catalyst to start a lot of subsequent other moments in adding to your confidence level.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And I'm curious. We're not weighted all the way towards 100%. So I'm curious, what, if anything, could be added to the other side of the scale that would decrease your confidence level in the God existing? What do you think you could see in the world or learn about the world to to start to tip the scales in the other direction?
I'm not sure what I could see now. Maybe early on there might have been things that would have affected my trajectory in terms of, there's a possibility of arguments that could have been made that might have told me that maybe I'm self-deceived, maybe I'm interpreting this the wrong way or whatever. At this point, I mean, I spent so much time, studying the arguments on all sides to the point where I'm not sure what else there is to say. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, perhaps you can't think of something that might shift your confidence lower in the claim of the God exists.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, I'm not sure what that would be exactly.
Okay.
And not that there can be something, but just that I'm pretty aware of the evidence that is out there, and I know the level of how compelling the evidence is that is out there. So I'm not sure. Like, I mean, unless there's something out there that I haven't come across for some reason.
Mm-hmm. And how about if something that's on the side of the scales that is helping? How about if a piece was removed, such as if you could discover that you were mistaken in the revelation that you had experienced? Would that lower your confidence at all that God exists?
I mean, it should. Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but yeah, like, I don't know. I'm not sure what kind of situation.
Just totally hypothetical.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they would reduce it to more of a what would you call it? A neutral position on the topic.
Okay, so it sounds like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll try to give a summary of my understanding. But it sounds like that the revelation is accounting for a fairly large amount. So we have also the text of the Bible and something, but if the revelation was removed from that side of the scales, it would shift you far more towards a neutral position on the claim. The revelation itself is making up a large part of the claim.
Yeah, making up some percentage.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And I suppose if I and now as an outsider, I have you here suggesting that the God of the Christian Bible is real, and if I'm approached by somebody else from another faith and they're providing me with the same information, is there any way for me to discern between the two as an outsider, or and is their claim just as valid that a different God is true, such as Vishnu? Or
yes, yeah. So what I was trying to say, I don't know if you came across properly in my last talk with Will, is that what I'm talking about is a claim that a God exists. So essentially, like, I guess to give a definition of God, it would be and part of the problem is that Will and I have never been able to get past this one hurdle, which is to kind of draw a line between the natural and the supernatural. But assuming that there is such a thing as a supernatural, the next step that needs to be taken for something to qualify as God is that it's an intelligent entity. So essentially, like, there could be such a thing as a supernatural, but it's not like a conscious, self-aware, intelligent entity. Well, that would be maybe a force, maybe something else. So that wouldn't quite qualify as a God. But if it's an intelligent entity that is capable of, like, interacting with the natural world in some way,
right,
then that would be where I would draw the line. So my whole discussion was, this would be sufficient evidence for somebody to believe that there is some kind of intelligent entity out there.
Right. But if I may, do you accept that the particular Christian God of the Bible is the God that exists, or you're not certain? It's some nondescript.
I'm personally a Christian.
Right.
So I believe in the Christian God, but the basis for that belief is somewhat different. So essentially, like, I start off with these two steps. The first step is reason and science bring us to kind of a neutral situation where we don't know, like, between a couple of possibilities or several possibilities, which is correct. The next step is there's a personal experience that some kind of intelligent entity exists out there. And this is something that's available to everybody. So, somebody in India or somebody in Africa or in China or Japan or somewhere that maybe has been completely disconnected from Western thought can still have experiences, the same kind of experiences, even though they interpret them differently, um, based on their theological framework. And then the theology, the way I approach that is just basically these are theoretical models, and different parts of the world, different religions have their own theoretical models, and it's a matter of looking at them, evaluating them, and trying to see if they make sense of all the data and how they approach the data.
So what part of the Christian Bible has led you to take the step from the acknowledgement that there is a conscious entity controlling the universe to it being this particular? What do you find is the piece of evidence or multiple pieces of evidence that led you to believe that it was particularly the God of the Bible that is that mind?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, at least in my opinion, the Christian story makes better sense of reality. And I'm not trying to offend anybody that's coming from a different religion. I think, like what I was saying before, I think that the possibility exists for multiple perspectives to have a rational framework. So, people could be rational in different religions, and then everybody's welcome to check them out, to hear out the other person's point of view and see which one they think makes more sense to them.
Yeah, no, I understand. And let's, of course, say that our belief in one thing is not a ridicule of another. I don't think you take that stance, but I'm still interested in, for you and your personal belief, what moved you from that uncertain conscious being to the particular one. It's just a general sense that the Bible itself as a text makes sense to you. It's more coherent with reality than other representations.
The overall paradigm, the overall expression of reality, that at least how I understand it, because really Christianity is actually multiple religions in one. So, just saying somebody's a Christian doesn't really say much. But, and it still kind of goes in steps, because there's multiple versions of Christianity, but they have certain things in common, or at least there's things that several positions might agree with, and I can say, okay, we all agree on this, but then we differ here and here. And I have a particular model that I think makes the most sense, but if somebody else agrees with a different one, that's fine.
Yeah, I understand. I guess I'm just curious what that model is for you. Like, in terms of the Bible comporting to reality, is the story such as like the story of Genesis? Is that true? The earth being created in 7 days, and
Yeah, so I don't, basically, like, my particular approach. I don't know how to say this without getting into a big long conversation that will take us off topic, but there's many ways to interpret Genesis, and many ways to interpret a lot of different things in the Bible. But yeah, I don't necessarily take everything at face value. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to go in that direction, because that'll take us in a whole different.
I guess what I'll try to explain. All I'm interested really is the parts that you used. It's interesting that there could be multiple interpretations of the text or the evidence. I'm interested in what your interpretation is, and how it then adds to your confidence that a God is real. So it's not to worry that there could be. I mean, imagine for me, I was trying to interpret the text, and you were to guide me to the correct interpretation. Is there? Do you know which parts helped you, or do you understand sort of what I'm asking? Or?
Yeah. I mean, you basically want to know how I see it, which is fine.
Yeah, Yeah,
Um,
I'm interested in your epistemology.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the difference in people's interpretation has to do with differences about how people, uh, how they understand the way knowledge is communicated. Like, okay, so let's say you came from a Catholic background, so there's certain assumptions in Catholicism that are based on like pretty much Aristotle and those like Greek philosophy, which assumes that the expression is natural theology. So basically, a lot of theology within Catholicism claims to be drawn from nature itself and from the way the world is built. In my perspective, that doesn't really work because the entire Aristotelian metaphysics is not. At least I don't agree with it. I mean, I understand why people believe in it. I don't think that's the legitimate approach to metaphysics. At least, or let me say it this way: I think that's not the metaphysics of the Bible. I think it's superimposed on the Bible, so I don't really follow that same way of thought. Now, I know this stuff is getting a little bit too philosophical, but yeah. So, sorry, I'm I'm getting off track. So, what's your question again?
No, I'm just interested in. So, if I could run a brief summary of where I think we've got at the moment, it's that
Yeah.
um, there is this general sense of a deity that a lot of people from a lot of different cultures arrive at. It's a common thing in humanity, um, and um, you you were led to that by a sort of personal revelation in the sense that you looked at the world and things happening, and it gave you a sense that there was some entity governing that journey through life, and then through an event in a difficult time in your life, you were directed to a pastor who I assume was of the Christian faith. Is that right?
Yeah.
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 And through his uh, help and guidance, and then through subsequent learning of the Christian Bible, you went from this vague sense of a deity to a very particular one. You now
Hmm.
believe that the God of the Bible is true. And yeah, I'm curious in a sense of the weight. So we have the revelation, and we have the teachings of the Bible, which seem, in your opinion, to comport to reality. And these all things are adding to the truth that the God is real, right? So the God of the Christian Bible is real. So um, if if you started to have doubts in the veracity of the Bible, totally hypothetically, if something were to come to light that were to call into question certain or many parts of the Bible, would it lower your confidence? Uh, would it lower your confidence in the Christian God being true, or?
Um, Theoretically, it could. The the way that I think about the Bible is like I don't. Okay, let me say it this way. I think a lot of Christians have certain assumptions about the nature of the Bible that makes it hard for them to come across challenges or discrepancies or difficulties because they assume the Bible is inerrant.
Mhm.
So basically, what they assume is that God gave some kind of revelation to some individual, and the individual wrote it down, and because of that, whatever's there is exactly the way it needs to be. I don't agree with that particular approach to the scripture. I think that if God did interact with some individuals and gave them some kind of information, it was based on what they were able to understand and based on their own ability to make sense of it. So, at different times in human history, like say somebody from the 21st century went back in time and talked to different people, some 3,000 years ago, some 2,500 years ago, and over an extended period of time, and just talk to them about different things. Those people have to make sense of it within their world, within their context, make sense of what they received, and then communicate it to the community around them to whom they were writing the particular text of scripture, because it wasn't just written for us; it was written for somebody at that point in time. So, you know, the text is limited by the ability of the individuals to make sense of what is being said and their ability to communicate it. And some people are more skilled at communicating because they were educated. Some people in some texts in the Bible are just random people that don't know. Maybe they were shepherds or fishermen or something, so they just wrote the best they could. So, like I don't take that inerrant approach to scripture. So because of that, I don't expect things to be perfect, to be without problems from beginning to end or anything like that. So.
And what filter what might we use to decide which parts of the Bible are accurate and which are not, which are the truthful ones and which are is the coherence of the writer an important factor, or what might we use to discern the parts of the Bible that we would consider to be an actual description of reality versus a fable or a poorly written, errant as you
Yeah.
would use.
Yeah. So the idea that I work with is that if the Bible was meant to be the means of revelation, then the collection of writings that form the Bible as a whole uh, should be making a correct statement on whatever it is that whatever idea or concept we're studying. The collection as a whole should be correct, but the individuals might be off. So if you could think of it from a scientific or statistical perspective, where you could look at let's say you do an experiment and you collect some body of data. You have 10,000 points of data and you put them on a graph. Um, there could be anomalies all over the place, but if the majority of the data is pointing in some trajectory, you could draw your line and still get the feel for where the data is heading, even though individual data points might be, some might be way off over here, some might be there, but as a whole, you could get the sense of where where something is headed.
Right. So
Yeah.
there, as a collection of stories, there may be errors in it, but as long as the story told as a whole appears to make sense, then we could rely on the veracity of the story, that the story might be true.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, like you can deal with occasional or potential errors if you have a larger body of data that you can compare everything to and kind of get a sense for what the majority of data is pointing.
Is it possible that the stories in the Bible might make sense to us and might seem to comport to reality, but be false anyhow? Is that
I mean,
possible?
anything is possible. Like, yeah, anything is possible. But that the the assumption is if this is a method that God might use to communicate with humanity, how would it work? And this is a potential for it to work. Um, I think a lot of Christians in general, especially on the conservative side of things, kind of got fixated on the idea of inerrancy, and because of that, they're pushed into a corner, so to speak, because they have to defend every single claim, every single element. I don't think that's necessary because I mean we gotta allow for the humanity of the process. So
Right. And do you think that there are parts of the Bible or its teachings that describe the world or describe morality or any number of things in a way that we couldn't arrive at without the Bible?
no, I think morality is. And I think I've said this in a conversation with Will before, but I'm not a fan of the argument from morality, which apologists use as an evidence for the existence of God, because I think morality is actually more intrinsic to the nature of reality. So, like, uh, basically, our human constitution, our human psychology, um, especially as a social creature, just naturally has certain elements to it that work better than others. So we
Mm-hmm.
can deduce certain things about morality through trial and error. Yeah, some might take us longer than others, but I think
Yeah.
morality. In other words, it's possible to have morality even as an atheist. I don't think that
Okay.
argument
Nice.
is
Interesting.
a legitimate claim for the existence of
Yeah.
God.
And then I guess my next question would be, could the Bible be written as it is and teach the things it does, and the same lessons be drawn from it without any relation to divinity at all, without
Yeah,
being
yeah.
divine?
If you're talking about lessons for, how do we live, what's moral, what's good and bad, then that's fine. I think, um, it might take us a while. It's one example I've used in the past is like, let's say you buy some complicated machinery and you lose your instruction manual. You might start to tinker with it and figure out how some things work, and then over time, as you keep tinkering with it, you might figure out, oh, it has this feature as well. I didn't know, and learn things over time because you don't have the instructions, but they're still there, and you can still figure them out just by,
Right.
So it might have taken humanity thousands of years to figure out things like human rights. We've gone in so
Yeah.
many phases of, you know, working through things over time until, wow, society is finally realizing, hey, racism is bad. I mean,
Yeah, I understand that. So I might try to reframe that question in another way. So basically, what I'm asking is, could the text exist as it is, and everything still began, but it not be divinely inspired, for it to
sure.
be a fictional story and not be related to?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's possible.
yeah,
So again, like what I'm saying is, I mean, say the Bible could be just it came together through some. By the way, I read that book you suggested by what's his name, Don. I don't remember the name now. You told me this book.
or was it one
Dots.
that Will suggested? Or
Oh, maybe it could be. Let me see. Um, Breaking the Spell.
nice, yeah,
Dennett.
yeah, Dan Dennett, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So that book spells out how something could arrive by just natural processes, natural evolution processes. The idea is this: that like if we allow for the possibility that God exists based on just this, some of the things I discussed in previous videos, that the possibility is still has a there's a legitimate possibility for the existence of God. That's number one, and then people have these experiences that give them additional reason to believe that God exists. Then it's possible that there is such a thing as revelation, but maybe it's not the Bible, maybe it's the Quran, or maybe it's something in the Indian religion, and it's just a matter of like trying to understand how these different approaches work, and which makes more sense in terms of reality as we know it.
right. And I'm curious, do you think that possibility is a reliable way to arrive at things that are true about the world, mere possibility, or?
Well, on one side, you don't really have. I mean, no matter what you do, you're arriving at something. So um, that's one area where I often kind of clash with atheists, because atheists have the sense that they're standing sort of off the platform, judging everything on the platform, when in fact it's not possible to not be part of the game. It's like,
Mhm.
you're in this thing with everybody else, and if you don't choose this option, then you're automatically doing something else, and you might not think it is, but there's a whole set of things that need to be true for that other possibility to be true. So there's multiple options, and all we could do is kind of look around and see how they come together, and how will they address the questions of life. I mean, there's a lot of questions that are legitimate questions, like, okay, why is it that if there is a God, he hasn't revealed himself to us in a way that's more clear? Why is there suffering in the world? What's the plan? What is God doing? All these different things, and every religion tries to answer those questions, and the question is, how well does it do it, and does it make sense? Does it add up, and so on. So
And yeah, okay. And I'm curious if someone could have that framework where they believe that a governing mind rules of the world, and then believe that they have personal revelation and be mistaken on that revelation. Is that a possibility?
I didn't quite understand the question.
So if someone experiences revelation as or believes they have experienced revelation and come to draw conclusions about the world. Oh, your fan is going quite loud right now. I'm not sure. Oh, think it's okay. It's correcting itself. Sorry, I could barely hear myself
Okay.
talk there. If could someone have what they believe to be divine revelation and be mistaken? Is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of people. I mean, basically, there's two possibilities: either everybody's wrong, or at least one group of people is right and everybody else is wrong, because a lot of these different points of view disagree with each other or conflict each other. So it's unlikely that all, several of them that come from very different perspectives could be right at the same time. So you could look around and try to see which one makes the most sense. I mean, I don't know.
And as someone who hasn't experienced revelation, or even someone in your position that has, but it is different, how do we discern which of those revelations are correct?
I mean, that depends on what specific question you're trying to make sense of. So, so there's, let's say we take the question of human suffering. There's 5, 6, 7 models I can think of that people have come up with over the years to explain human suffering in a way that tries to still defend God's honor in the process. Because obviously you could say God is evil and then that solves everything.
Mm-hmm.
But there's several models for that, and take some other question and look at the different models and see how well they do.
Right. I guess if we could make that scenario as simple as possible, you yourself have a revelation that says A, and the next person has a revelation that says not A. As myself sitting here being told the two revelations, is there any way I could discern which of the two have the truth, if any?
Yeah, I think you can. I think you would have to take the time to look at them and study them out.
Okay.
I don't really know how to answer that question without taking a long time to kind of work through the different religions and work through the claims they make and the processes they follow.
Imagine new claims, though, that were outside of religion. It might say, and imagine that hypothetical of just as simple as A and not A. Is there any testing that we could do? For example, does revelation change anything in the physical world? Does your brain state change? Could we detect it with some kind of fMRI? Or is there any way that we might be able to discern impartially as an outsider which revelation is true?
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna have anything like that. Another thing is that a lot of the claims that different religions make are based on certain assumptions about the nature of reality behind the scenes, and those claims sort of are derived logically from those assumptions. So, for example, some versions of Christianity and even other religions are built on a Platonic perspective of reality. Others are built on an Aristotelian perspective of reality. Others are built on kind of a different approach to the whole thing. So that has some impact on it, and that's another thing. A lot of these things are not really falsifiable, but you could think about whether there's a reason for following those approaches or not. Anyway, I don't. That's again something that gets kind of complicated as well.
Yeah.
But that's another.
So, yeah, no problem. And I do want to be conscious of your time, because we have been talking for a while now, and I know you're a very busy man. So I guess we could sort of start to wrap up the conversation there. I guess a final thought might be, I would question whether revelations, if we pick any revelation, yours or person A or anyone's revelation, and I would be curious to know if it's seeming like how logical it seems to relate to reality, if that is enough to believe that revelation is true or not, or if we might require more. But yeah.
The thing is this, that essentially you just don't have more. And that's again the one of the reasons I spend the time with Will talking about all the other stuff, is that that's where it all starts. That's where the difference in perspective all starts, because um, and in fact that's the basis of epistemology, like the assumptions we bring to the table before we do everything else. Like the way I look at it, it's kind of like, sometimes I use the example of a political parties type of situation. Like, somebody might say, hey, uh, I'm not a Republican, I'm not something else, I'm just an A Democrat. I don't agree with Democrats. Well, unfortunately, in the end, it's going to be one of the two presidents, and the other guy's going to win if you have enough of an influence convincing people not to vote for the first person.
Hmm.
And in life, it's kind of like that. Like, we we have limited information, and there's nothing we can do to change that. This is where we're at, and we have limited options, and we end up picking something. So sure, I could take any position and I can poke holes in it, but then that just means I'm going to switch out to another position that I can poke just as many holes in.
Is
So
is there anything wrong if we have a limited information set to saying that we don't know, rather than being forced to draw conclusions
um,
from a list of available conclusions?
you could say you don't know, but then you end up living life, and you end up living life a certain way, and you know, so
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Well, look, I think we should wrap the conversation there. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and as I said, I'm really grateful that you would take the time to talk to me. Did you have any questions for me, or any feedback, or
Not necessarily. I mean, like this, there's the limitation to this format you guys use,
Mhm.
because there's only so much that can be said in this
Yeah.
kind of a, yeah, but
Yeah, I understand, and I don't, you know, it's not, we're definitely not here to come to any conclusions or change your minds. It's just an exploration, and it might inspire some thought in you in some topics or not. But I certainly enjoyed it, and I'm grateful you took the time. And um, just as a side note, at the end of the recording, this was recording the entire time, and
yeah,
uh, how have you felt for the conversation? Being comfortable with everything that has been said?
yeah,
And
yeah. It's fine. I mean, I don't think we've necessarily accomplished too much, but
yeah,
there's only so much we can do, I guess, in the time we have, and
yeah,
yeah.
and it's difficult. I mean, just talking to each other now outside of the SE
Mhm.
conversation, but it's I felt that you didn't want to go too deep on one particular topic, which is why I sort of kept it. Sort of had a little bit of hesitation there, but if you thought there were any value in drilling down deeper, then not obviously not now. You're obviously very busy, but in the future, I'd be more than happy to have another conversation with you. But yeah, it's
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, basically, all I've kind of said, all I've tried to say, within the wider context of conversation between theists and atheists, is that we have certain foundational assumptions that we're making that kind of, like, I use this example in one of my videos. It's like somebody sends you $1,000 to pay your rent, but you're 500 in the negative in the bank. So
mm,
you got the money you needed to pay the rent, but now it's only, you only have 500 to work with because everything went into
mhm,
the hole.
yeah,
It's kind of like that. Like, we're discussing what are some good reasons to take this particular approach to religion versus some other approach, but because we haven't really worked with the foundational elements, everything kind of goes into this hole, so to speak.
mm.
And yeah, but
And to talk, to get right away from the street epistemology thing there, and I have the utmost respect for you, and I don't want anything to say to be perceived as disrespectful, but and I have watched the conversations and your subsequent responses, but I guess where I get off is the assumption that it's necessarily must be that 50-50 split that you go back to.
I don't want to say it's a necessary 50-50, because it depends how you split the question. Um, I need to do kind of another response video to it as well, but
Mhm.
basically, the way I see it is that, like, when I say that there's a line that could be drawn between the natural and the supernatural, I don't feel like I'm saying anything out of the ordinary, because the conversation has been done that way for 1,000 years or more, thousands of years actually, probably since the Greeks, where there was this sort of imaginary line, like we can imagine reality in our minds, as being purely natural from beginning to end. We could imagine there being something outside this natural sphere. And if we do it that way, essentially you have either, like you could say A or non-A, as in natural, and anything that's not natural is supernatural. You could break it that way. Or you could break it in the other way. You could say, okay, God and everything that's not God. So A, non-A that way. So anything that qualifies as God is on one side, anything that is not God. Or you could maybe break it into three parts and say, there's the natural, there's the God, and by God I mean some kind of intelligence, and anything that's supernatural but not God is the third category. So you could break it into three possibilities. And the only way that really plays into something that we can tangibly think about from where we stand is the impact this has on our reality, because we can imagine the material universe either as having developed naturally from beginning to end, or as having developed mostly naturally, but there's some kind of occasional supernatural element that comes in. That it's not necessarily God, but maybe there's some kind of force or some kind of energy or something that moved it along. Or we could picture it as something that has been engineered. So some intelligence sat down and said, no, I need to build this thing, and this is how I'm going to do it. And essentially, the only way to answer that question is to study the universe and probably over the next 1,000 years, figure out how it works and figure out which kind of universe we live in. So
yeah, I guess the part I found really fascinating about the discussion, and sorry, I really want to be mindful of your time. And this stuff
don't
really
worry about it. I have a few more minutes if you want to finish this.
Yeah. So I guess again, this is now just talking personally and outside.
Sure.
What really fascinated me is, or where I become a little worried or skeptical is where the space for the possibility of the supernatural arrives from its penetrating into our world. And you gave the simulation example of the Minecraft characters. And where my skepticism alarms start going off is how selective the process is. And also it's as if the programmers have altered the mind of one of the Minecraft characters, but simultaneously deleted the memory and the possibility of the detection of that change in your Minecraft character B in this scenario. Your brain has been altered with additional information from something external to reality, and it seems to me like you're saying also at the same time this external programmer has deleted his traces leaving the world so that it could never possibly be detectable by anyone else other than the recipient of the revelation inside the simulation.
I wouldn't go that far. So we're talking about kind of different things. Like one of the things I was trying to talk about is the creation of the universe itself. So this is all. So essentially, like I would say, let's discuss the first part, which is like everything exists. So even if we imagine a deist God, like God built everything and moved on, right? We could have that discussion there. Then the question is, how does this supernatural, whatever it is, interact with natural reality, and what is our ability to detect it? And this is a question that maybe I have to kind of develop more carefully and take the time to do it properly. But our scientific processes have certain limitations in this respect, because sure, like if we could take the supernatural interference and put it into a controlled experimental environment, yeah, for sure we could see it. Like say intercessory prayer, like in that Dennett book, he was talking about all these experiments, right? There's no reason why we couldn't detect supernatural interference if we could set up an experiment. We had 100,000 people pray for something and set up with double-blind controls, placebos, and everything else, right? We should be able to detect that if it worked.
Right.
I don't, back when he wrote that book, he said it hasn't been done yet, but I don't think even if they did those experiments that it would be detectable. Like, I don't expect that we're going to see proof of God that way. But if there was some kind of divine interference in history, like say over the millennia or millions of years since the origin of the universe, we don't really have a process to detect it, because the way we go about our science is to come up with hypotheses and make predictions and then test those predictions. But our hypotheses are always mechanistic. They're always like they follow some kind of material process and try to see if those work.
Right.
We don't sit there and say, okay, what if there was supernatural interference here or there? How do we detect that? Because we don't have a way to examine that question.
Right. So I guess where I get confusion there is because you speak of contemporary examples of revelation, and also your sort of your programmer analogy sort of speaks of the supernatural influence coming while conscious minds are around, as opposed to in the past, but like prior to.
That is also something I'm saying after having dealt with the issue first within this deistic paradigm, right? But even then, like the possible, like it is theoretically possible for God to do something that we can detect scientifically. Like we could set up an experiment and say, okay, tell God to talk to you now, and we're going to sit here and put you on an MRI machine or something and see if there's anything.
Has any information arrived? Is there new information that we don't know the source of, etc.?
We could theoretically do that. Like all along, though, the underlying assumption here is that we're kind of trying to catch God in the act, which I'm not sure why exactly God would even want to play that game, because if he wanted to do some kind of public display, he would have done that already. Like, I mean, he could have easily said, hey, I'm here. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that negates the possibility of God still interacting with humanity within people's daily lives that we're not really in a position to comment on. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's a whole can of worms there that we're not going to have time to get into.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there is a small acknowledgement there of that we could be right in and possibly detect that intervention, even if we take it away from God and go back to the Minecraft example. As the second Minecraft character, I could look at the brain of the first and understand that it has been changed in some tangible way within the Minecraft world, you know. So that's an interesting topic.
I mean, it's possible. Like, I don't know, you take a person, they've had some kind of massive life-changing experience, and you might be able to put them in an MRI machine and say, some change happened in the brain physiology. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't know what caused it. You wouldn't be able to say that's a proof of anything or evidence.
No, of course not. But it would be a step in the direction of saying that the world has been altered by a source we don't understand. You know, that's kind of where I'm getting at. Yeah. Well, look, Mike, I also want to use this as just sort of a wrap up for the video for editing purposes for Will. So I'll just say thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I've enjoyed the conversation. And if you want to correspond by text about anything we've said today or anything like that, please go ahead. And ultimately, you know, whether this conversation is used or not will be up to Will. It'll go on his channel. And
for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm going to be out for about 3 weeks. I got this massive project to finish, and I'm going to try to eliminate distractions, because otherwise I'm going to be thinking about everything in the world except what I need to be working on.
I fully understand.
When I'm back, we could definitely get back in touch and take it from there.
I really appreciate it. It's been great to meet you, Mike, and good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Take care, Mike. Bye.
Take care. Bye.